Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Think and Reform podcast. My name is Luke Saint, and thank you for listening to the Think and Reform podcast. Be sure to go to futureofchristendom.org. This episode is brought to you by Future of Christendom. Be sure to go there and check out our latest events. We have a conference coming up in October 9th to the 11th. We'll be having a debate. We'll have Jeff Durbin and Eli Ayala there. I think I got his name right there. And we'll have the name of the conference is No Other Name, and we're talking about Christ's rule amidst the cults of the world, amidst the cults of religion, the cults of Mormonism and Eastern Orthodoxy and statism and things like that. And we choose the words carefully, but we are going to be having a debate with Chris and I over on Lancaster Patriot. We're going to be having a debate. Lord willing, we're going to be debating two atheists from the Lancaster Free Thought Project. We met with the guys, and they're nice guys, and so far they're willing to have a debate with us. So we'll be hosting a debate. I believe the thesis of the debate is the Christian God exists. That's what it is so far. So check out futureofchristendom.org for more information on that. Sign up, and we'd love to see you out there. So today we are going to be just doing a couple of varieties of a couple different things. I'm going to start today with a discussion and a frustration that I may have addressed before on this podcast, but I'm going to address it again or talk about it again. And it's Deuteronomy 23, verse 15. You shall not give up to his master a slave who has escaped from his master to you. That's a law in the Bible. I think that the majority of Christianity does not know what to do with this verse, which is completely, we read this verse and we don't know how to translate it, or we don't know how to process it. We think to ourselves, surely this can't be a law, right? Because this would make slavery not a thing, right? I mean, we can't just read it and do it as it says, because then no one would be enslaved, right? So there's got to be something else. And what a lot of people do is read into it, they read into it like, oh, it just means from a foreigner. The problem with that is those people who take that view, again, most people are for immigration, and closed borders and things like that. And, you got to report yourself to the magistrate to justify what you're doing. If you take the explanation of this verse, Deuteronomy 23:15, as they're talking about foreign slaves, that means that they get free entry to the country, right? That's what that means, right? Because you're not allowed to return him to his slave. If it only applies to foreign slaves and people from outside your country, this would be, first off, it would be inapplicable, right? Because the slave could never get in, right? He'd have to justify himself to the magistrate, and the magistrate would say, oh, you're lying to me. You're just trying to take advantage of this law, so you can't come in, and so go back to your master or whatever. So, most Christians are of the idea that people have to justify themselves. So this verse can't mean a foreigner, because if we were to take it as a foreigner, that means the magistrate would not be allowed to refuse the slave entry, right? It says, he shall dwell with you in your midst, in the place that he shall choose within one of your towns, wherever it suits him, you shall not wrong him. So the magistrate does not have authority to deny entry into the country a foreign slave who's retreating from his master, right? And of course, the problems that would come if we actually applied this the way that it's written, or the way that many people understand this verse. If it's just applying to foreign-born slaves, everyone come in would be like, oh, I'm a slave. I'm running from my master. Let me in, right? And the magistrate wouldn't be able to do anything, right? So it can't mean that, right? It can't mean a foreign-born slave. So it has to be a local slave, somebody who's already within your borders, right? And if our understanding of God's system and God's law is so poor that we're so statist in our thinking, we don't know how to process this law. There's no place for it. It's like a bird flying around in our minds that's not landing anywhere, because we just have no category. We have no way to process this law. Nobody knows what to do with it. Nobody quotes it. I mean, it basically doesn't exist in the Christian mind, this law right here, because we just don't know what to do with it. But what I'm going to try to do today is explain how this law works itself out in God's system. I'm going to try and explain to you what this means and how it only makes sense with God's law. If you do it with any other law system, it doesn't make sense. But it only makes sense within God's system, right? Since God's law is cohesive, each law must be understood not just in terms of the other laws, but also of God's system. You can't bring in constitutional republicanism and drop it on God's law and expect things to go well. You have to understand not only God's law, but God's system. So what I'm going to try and explain to you is the idea behind this is that when somebody is sold into slavery, Exodus talks about someone who steals something, he must pay back, X amount. If he does not have anything, it says he shall be sold. He shall be sold for his work. I think that's Exodus 22. If he, let me just read it here. He should be sold for his labor, I think. Exodus 22. Yes. Yeah. I believe it's Exodus 22. Oh man, I'm messing it up here. Okay, here it is. Exodus 20. Yeah, okay, that's my problem here. 22:3, verse 3 here. But if the sun has risen on him, there shall be blood guilt for him. He shall surely pay. If he has nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. Okay, he shall be sold for his theft. Okay, and this is where we get the idea of indentured servitude. That if you don't have enough capital to pay back what you stole, the way God has set up, restitution to be executed, you shall be sold. You should be sold for your theft. That means that you must pay it back through labor. You'll be forced into labor to pay it back. Now, I want to point out that the inability for us to understand Deuteronomy 23:15 in light of Exodus 22 and vice versa is because of the way we basically let the world teach us on slavery, and we let Hollywood teach us on slavery, and we let history teach us on slavery, but we don't let the Bible teach us on slavery. So what's going on here in Deuteronomy 23:15 is that someone who has escaped his master, a slave who has escaped his master, he shall not return to his master, right? The magistrate is not permitted in a court of law to force the slave to return to his master. Not allowed. Okay? So if you bring a slave who's run away up on charges and say, hey, he ran away from me, the magistrate is not allowed to say you have to go back. Okay? The thief is allowed to leave, or the slave, in most cases would be thieves, the slave is allowed to leave at any time. And that way he ultimately controls his destiny. God's version of slavery is the master is ultimately in control of his labor, but the thief is ultimately in control of his liberty. He actually has the final say. So the thief or the slave can't be punished for running away. You cannot punish the thief for running away. What you can punish him for is not paying back what he owes. Okay? So if someone steals from me and they don't have enough money to pay it back, and then they agree to work for maybe not even me, maybe it's just some businessman out in, I don't know, like Oklahoma or something like that. And the thief says, okay, well, the judge says, okay, I'm sending this guy to this guy out here in Oklahoma, and he's got to work for him until he pays back what he stole from you. Okay? And I say, all right, fine, that's fine. So the thief goes out and becomes the slave, if you will, of this guy out in Oklahoma. But the guy in Oklahoma is a jerk. He abuses the thief, and he doesn't pay him what he owes him. So the thief runs away and says, or the slave runs away and says, I'm not going to work for that guy. The magistrate at that point, and me at that point, we are not allowed to bring up that slave or that thief on charges. So far, he's done nothing wrong. right? He's done nothing wrong. What he's doing wrong, if he is going to do anything wrong, is not pay me back. That's the wrong thing that he's doing. So if he runs away and just lives out his days, and he goes to work and he doesn't pay me back, that's the crime. Not running away from the master. That's not the crime. Okay. So he has two options at this point. When a slave runs away from his master, if you will, and he's using these terms, please remove from your head the Hollywood and American chattel slavery idea of master and slave. When the slave runs away, he has two options. One is to ignore his responsibility to pay me back, and the other one is to find a new person to submit himself to, or go back to the judge and say, this guy's a horrible person. Can you send me to somebody else, please, so that I can finish paying back what I stole? So if I'm going to press charges and I'm not being paid back, what I would pursue would be a capital offense, a capital punishment from this point. Because the judge, the Bible says that if you do not follow the judge's ruling, that's a capital offense. Okay? So if the thief decides not to pay me back, let's say he stole $20,000, and now through the judge's ruling of restitution, he now owes me $40,000, and he says I'm not going to pay it back. What I would do was I would charge him, or a witness, doesn't necessarily have to be me, but a witness or an accuser would charge him with violating the judge's orders to pay me back. Okay, so that's what he's violating. He's not violating his relationship to the master. Okay, that's not a crime to run away from your master. If you don't like your master, you can run away at any time, right? The crime is not paying me back. That's the crime. So at that point, I would not press charges that he ran away from his master, and the master could not press charges that the thief ran away. Under God's system, you cannot. The magistrate has no say about forcing the thief or slave to go back to his master. Cannot do that. What they can do is say, okay, you are not paying back. Like, I saw what you did there. You were at a place. Okay, you're mistreated, but now you're not paying back the person that you owe. There's nothing in your life saying that you're paying back. Okay, so now it's a capital offense that you're denying the order that I gave you to pay him back, and now you're going to be executed. So that's where the enforcement of that law where the enforcement of the runaway slave comes from. It's not taking him and putting him back to his master, but it would be punishing him for his refusal to pay back the person that he stole. That's the offense from whom he stole. Now, this would change based on the amount owed. You could ostensibly take someone to court that they stole $5, didn't pay you back, and someone he could have nothing. He could be a homeless person, have absolutely nothing that's worth $5 or $10 or $20 or whatever that he'd owe me, and then he could be sold for his theft, right? And he could still run away and say, I'm not paying it back. And I could still pursue him technically, or someone could pursue him as a capital offense because he's not paying me back. Now, for most people, $5 is not going to give enough conviction for me to pick up a stone and throw at this person or accuse him. I'm just going to say $5, whatever. But there might come a time where this person will do it on purpose, not as a challenge to me, but as a challenge to God's system and God and his word. At that point, yes, you could actually that could actually provide enough conviction for someone to execute someone over $5. If it's something that's called high-handed, as the Bible puts it, acting presumptuously, or high-handed, like an obvious, I'm going to take something so petty and I'm going to challenge God and his system, and I'm going to mock it publicly. And in that sense, that would provide enough conviction for somebody to actually lose their life over something silly like $5. So that's how we apply this law. Deuteronomy 23:15, you shall not give up a slave to his master, a slave who has escaped from his master to you. The slave hasn't done anything wrong. If he does anything wrong, it's his refusal to pay back the debts that he owes through this indentured relationship. Okay? That's what's wrong, not escaping his master. If he can basically choose whatever master he wants to work for, but he has to pay back the money. So the crime is not running away from the master. Okay? That's not a crime. That might be stupid, it might be foolish, it might be morally wrong, but it can never be legally wrong under God's system. So if you are going to enforce indentured servitude, you cannot do it by tying somebody to a certain master or certain land or whatever. You can only do it by you've disobeyed the judge's order, and now a new trial is going to come up where you're going to be put under trial for disobeying the judge's order. You have to justify yourself. Now your life is on the line. Before it was just your time and your wealth and your energy. Now it's your life. So in that way, he actually gets an appeal, and that's the appeal process of God's law as well. So I just wanted to explain that to everyone, how this makes sense only in God's system. It doesn't make sense in anyone else's system. You know, God is the author of everything that is good. All of his ways are just. All of his ways are right and pure and holy. And when we apply our minds to learn God's laws, the way that God has communicated them, we find that they are wise and we find that they are just. And you find that there's no reason for you to get off the foundation of God's law and go stand on some sort of Roman foundation or Catholic foundation. There's no reason to do that, as many people have done, especially lately. So I just wanted to have a fun talk about that, and hopefully help you understand how Deuteronomy 23:15 applies in God's law and in God's system. The crime is not running away, can never be running away from your master, if you will. That's never a crime in God's law. The crime is disobeying the judge's order to pay someone back money that you stole. So, now someone might bring up Paul and say, well, look at Paul, Paul and Philemon. Let's see. Oop. Verse 8, Philemon, verse 8, accordingly, though I'm bold enough in Christ to command you to do what is required, yet for love's sake I prefer to appeal to you, I, Paul, an old man and now a prisoner also for Christ Jesus. I appeal to you for my child Onesimus, whose father I became in my imprisonment. Formerly he was useless to you, but now he is indeed useful to you and to me. I am sending him back to you, sending my very heart. Now, this is not a judicial pronouncement against Onesimus. If you're going to convince a slave to go back to his master, listen, in God's system, sometimes the slave runs away, but he doesn't have a good reason to run away. Maybe he's just afraid, or he's a loser, or he's lazy, and he'd rather put his life at risk. And I'm not saying that's what happened. That's what's happening here. But it is okay to try and convince somebody to go back to the person you were working for to pay off your debts. It's okay to convince them. It's not okay to bring in the magistrate to punish them if they don't go back. So Paul's allowed, and completely consistent with scriptural jurisprudence, to convince somebody to go back and reason with them and maybe change their opinion, right? And it's okay to try to convince someone to go back, but you cannot bring in the magistrate to force someone to go back at penalty to their life or their time or what have you. So this is completely consistent with scriptural law. And it's not a what about, it's not a good what about, suddenly God's system is being reframed and it's okay now to return slaves to the masters. No. Paul convinced Onesimus to go back, and Onesimus went back, but that's how you do it. If you're going to get someone to go back, you have to convince them. So that's a very interesting discussion on the biblical slavery. I mean, I very rarely in a discussion of biblical slavery do I see Deuteronomy 23:15 brought up. People just don't understand it. They don't know how to process it. Like, I think people are afraid of it. But we shouldn't be afraid of any of God's laws. We should try to understand them and realize that every single one of God's law, especially on the weightier matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness, that these are beneficial to any society upon which they are instituted. So, with that, let's go to this silliness over here.
Jesus being mocked in the Mardi Gras would Jesus being mocked in the Mardi Gras be considered hate speech and captured by this law?
So this would be the Victorian Parliament, I guess. I'm not really sure how Australian politics work. They're talking about the Victorian MPs. Now, is that for all of Australia, or is that just, that certain region? Forgive my ignorance. So I can't say this is for all of Australia. Maybe it is. But, just the language they're using, I'm not really sure who it's for. So I think it is regional because the discussion becomes about this. But just listen to this absolute silliness in this Australian Parliament.
Mrs. MacArthur,
So I guess there's a bill being put forth that's anti-discrimination, and some of the people are concerned that this bill only really applies to like Muslims and like Hindus and Buddhists, but the Christians won't be able to use it because the one parliament member said, well, if someone mocks Christ, will this bill apply to them? Can I then call the police and say, hey, someone's mocking Jesus, and the police will come and, put the boots in your bedroom, the jack boots in your bedroom, and, arrest you because you mocked Jesus? Basically, that's the question. Or is this just for Muslims to call the police on Christians because they said something bad about Ramadan or something like that? And so the people are worried here that this bill being put forth here in Australia is just something for people who are not Christians to use to nickel and dime the Christians, but the Christians won't be able to use it. So the question is, does this apply to, is this a tool, this bill, is this a tool for Christians to use as well as everyone else to call the police on when they feel like Christ is being discriminated against? And I guess one of the authors of the bill here is about to give her response and her justification. And just listen to the silliness as it goes on. I'll let it play at length here.
well, is your Jesus, what attributes does the Jesus that you're referring to have? Like it's a ridiculous situation that you're putting. You're making a mockery of this legislation, and I find your question really offensive.
Mrs. McCarthy.
Minister, I actually find your response offensive to the people who respect Jesus. So, what? Which people? Which Jesus? Jesus in the Christian sense, Minister.
Sorry, can we have some decorum, please? Mrs. MacArthur has the call.
Thank you, Deputy President. Thank you, Minister. I do find that actually offensive. This occurred where Jesus, the Jesus that people know in the Christian Bible to be, a part of their religious belief, being mocked in the Mardi Gras, they may well have found that offensive. Will that be captured under this law?
Sir?
Arthur, if I take literally your question and your reference to Jesus, your hypothetical is impossible because Jesus hasn't attended the Mardi Gras unless he has come back to life in a recent term of events that I'm unaware of. So your hypothetical situation is to making a mockery of serious legislation. More than happy to entertain your questions, but the literal reality of your hypothetical is even beyond hypothetical if I am to take your comments about the particular Jesus that we're referring to is the Jesus that is in the Bible, and you're saying, is he attending the Mardi Gras?
Mrs. Hermans?
Deputy President, so just to explain for the sake of the Minister, there was a situation recently at the Mardi Gras where a statue of Jesus was depicted and was jeered at and made fun of, which was highly offensive for many religious believers and would have been seen as a way of vilifying their actual faith, to take the symbol of their faith and their God and to take it in a way that was being made fun of and was in fact therefore making fun of everyone from that people group that may actually have followed Jesus and believe in Jesus to be more than just a statue. And so in this situation, the question is, could this be seen as a form of vilification? I mean, the question arises because one of the most vilified people groups in this state are actually people of religion who have the Christian faith as their religion.
Minister.
At the outset, these laws are designed to protect people's right to practice their religion, be it your religion is a protected attribute. Mrs MacArthur's question did not refer to a depiction of Jesus. In fact, she followed it up with making very clear that I was certain of the particular Jesus that she was referring to, and she referred to an individual. It also is a situation that, as I understand it, the Mardi Gras happens in Sydney. So we are talking about hypothetical of a real person, a depiction in a different state. So it would be something that we could. I'm not reflecting on the behaviour. I'm reflecting on the fact that you are trying to draw me into a hypothetical that is not something that. You saw Jesus in Sydney.
Sorry, can we, through the chair,
She
please?
said it was the real person.
Minister.
That's what she asked about.
Minister.
She did.
Minister.
She did. Mrs Hermans has clarified.
Minister. Through the chair, please. No arguments across the chamber. No, you weren't. It was arguments across the chamber. Mrs Hermans.
Deputy President, just to clarify, this is not a hypothetical. This is an actual situation that has happened. This is an actual situation. No, this was the situation that Ms MacArthur was referring to. It was an actual situation that happened recently, and the depiction was on social media as well and was available to all Victorians to be able to view, and was seen to be offensive to many people of religious belief. And so the question was, would this be captured in this bill, and would people who had become offended by this be able to then take action against the ones that either posted and or participated in this form of mockery?
Minister.
No, because it happened in New South Wales. You're asking me. You're referring to a real life situation now.
Excuse me. Can we just have one person talking at a time, please? Ms Crozier.
I'm not sure the minister has understood what Mrs MacArthur's actually referring to. This situation happened and it was widely reported. It was depicting a statue of Jesus, and somebody was taking a mockery and using it to offend those who have that religious belief. If it was the Prophet Muhammad, would that be captured in the same way? It could have offended those who, are of that particular religious belief. Or this is the point, and it did happen. It's not like you make out that Mrs MacArthur's making some ridiculous assertion that Jesus is up and living. It happened in the Mardi Gras, and there were people that took great offence. So, are you aware of the situation or not, of what happened at the Mardi Gras as Mrs MacArthur has described?
Sir?
This is the problem with trying to articulate what started as a hypothetical situation has been clarified as a real-life example. My answer to Mrs Hermans was because it happened in New South Wales. The answer to your... That's not the question that you asked.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I ask for your guidance on the fact that if I answer a question and then I'm told, oh, she was inferring something, it's making my job pretty difficult?
Thank you. I think that this has got a little bit out of hand with the...
Okay, so you heard that discussion. And my contention here is not necessarily of how. I mean, just okay. We all know that this lady who's trying to pass, the people who are trying to pass this bill and these laws, as you can just tell from the discussion, this is really aimed to give people who are not Christians ammo against Christians. That's okay. That's what's going on here. Okay, we can all see it. It's obvious. Okay, we know that's what's going on. I think even people who are probably moderates or people that even like Christianity were probably appeared to me to be so shocked at this lady's absolute embracement of ignorance and stupidity. Like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. How could this be construed? Like, we all know what would happen. Like the other lady said. We all know what would happen if there was a statue of Muhammad, it was being mocked, and this lady would be like, I don't, it doesn't matter. All the caveats I get. Well, I said about Jesus, I'm not going to say that about Muhammad. There's no way. There's no way. This you can just see from this bill and these people that were trying to give people who weren't Christians ammunition against Christians so that Christians can be further discriminated against and that we can invite the Muslims in to destroy our country just like every other country that they destroy. So that's not necessarily my problem with this. My problem with this is the system, and America has a similar system, the system that we instill in our nation, where these people can get up here and say the most asinine and stupid things, and they're completely held unaccountable. You know what all this discussion means at the end of the day? That bill still probably got passed, or even if it doesn't get passed, it'll come back again later and still get passed. That these politicians can get up there, and we have a system where we have people like this who function well in our government. Not only do they function well in our governments. We should never, ever set up a system where people like this can get into places of power and just be, say ridiculous things, institute ridiculous laws. And all the logic in the world. See, that's a problem. These people are trying to meet her with logic. Well, I think you don't understand what I'm saying. Like a couple people said, I still feel like you don't understand what I'm saying. Yes, she understood everything. She was deflecting. She was projecting. She was playing the fool on purpose, right? A requirement of being a politician is what I'm saying is you don't have to be honest. That's not a requirement. You don't have to be straightforward. You don't have to be an uprighteous person. You can function well in our systems and be corrupt. In fact, the more corrupt you are, the better you function. The less righteous you are, the more you're rewarded. The longer you'll stay in office, the more you can get done. The more righteous you are, the sooner you'll be kicked out. The more righteous you are, the more you will be opposed. The more faithful you are, the sooner you'll be asked to leave or impeached or what have you. That's why we have only barely 2 or 3 people in our entire political system who are honest people, and even them you can't even trust at the end of the day. Are they working for Christ and his interests, or are they working for their own interests? Are they going to cave? I mean, can they be bought? The fact that we have these systems in place where these politicians can get up there and say and have these absolutely stupid discussions with each other. That was a stupid discussion. But we have these systems where these people can get into power and they're rewarded for it, right? And then you can ask them and hit them with all the logic in the world and they can just say, okay, but if I get the votes, all the logic in the world's not going to stop these votes, right? And the bills get passed and blah, 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 blah. And you say, oh, no, that doesn't happen. Yeah, that's happened. That's happened. Obamacare, all the pork bills we pass, they're ridiculous and stupid. But they get passed. And all the logic in the world can't do anything about it. You don't have to be logical to be a politician. Logic is not rewarded. Logic is punished. And why are we trying to save and set up systems where if you're righteous, you're punished, and if you're wicked, you're rewarded? Why are we doing this? That's what you just saw. She was deflecting, she was being ignorant, she was being wicked, and there's absolutely no punishment for it at all. Maybe she gets owned a couple times by some angry mama bears on Facebook or what have you. But this bill still probably got passed. We know because we've had just as many ridiculous bills passed in our government. So my question is, why would anyone advocate for this system where these horrible people can get up here and function with immunity like this? That this is a feature of our government, that these stupid, wicked people can get up there and say stupid and wicked things, and people try to meet them with logic and rhetoric and argumentation and explanation. It just doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. Completely irrelevant. Bill still gets passed. Why would we try to fight and save or institute that kind of system, where a feature of the system is that wicked people thrive and righteous people get kicked out? You can just hit them with all the logic in the world. Then they can just say, okay, cool. If I get the votes, it gets passed. And do you think the politicians care about what's logical and reasonable? They don't. And anytime you set up a system with a legislature, because this is what we're looking at here, we're looking at a legislature. Anytime this system gets set up, wicked people are rewarded and righteous people are punished. Just a matter of time. Legislator plus time equals tyranny. Moving on to the next one. What happened to my video here? Oh, here it is. I want to talk about this one as well. I found this video very interesting. It's from the BBC from 1975. It's about an old Irishman walking to a mom and pop store and buying some items. Remember, this would be, was that, I guess that's 50 years ago now, right? 50 years ago, this guy was walking through the streets of Ireland from 1975. Let's have a listen to what he says.
Passed in here, where one man refuses to be packaged into a collection of serve-yourself shells, a small imitation of the new Big Brother. Morning, Mr. Broderick. Morning. How's business? Not so bad, thanks. Oh, that's something these days. Well, let's see now. I'll have a pound of raisins, and 2 pounds of sugar, and 2 pounds of flour. Supermarket people don't need to know anything about food, and sometimes I think it's just as well for their peace of mind. But the old-style grocer had to know a lot about the stuff he sold and how to handle it, and he knew about his customers too and their different tastes. He'd offer you advice and tell you about anything special, and he'd sell you just as much or as little as you wanted. 1 biscuit? 1 biscuit it is. Half a pound, quarter of a pound, 2 ounce. The scales did your bidding. How's this? What's wrong with a paper bag? I want raisins, and I've got raisins without having to pay for a wood-consuming cardboard carton overprinted with exclamation mark guff and probably wrapped in still more paper. I can remember pressing my little nose against batteries of these and waiting for somebody to take the lid off this sort of thing so that I could reach in for a sweet. Unhygienic? Well, maybe, but an eye-brightening treat when you're 5. Like city centres, country towns have changed too, but not quite everywhere. Here in Ennis, in the Irish Republic, this shopping street looks just as shopping streets once looked everywhere. There were thousands more little shops when I was a boy, each giving a living to a family. And then there were the big high-class grocers, smelling of coffee, and full of polished brass and great solid counters and aproned knowledgeable assistants and huge bins filled with everything that could be scooped onto the scales and paper bagged before your very eyes. And these shops gave a living to thousands. Another thing, you didn't have to wander about with a wire basket and queue to pay. You sat on a chair and gave your order. Here in Ireland, you could, and you still can, go one better and have a Guinness and a gossip while you considered things. And then you walked out unladen, and the whole lot was delivered, often within the hour, by a boy with a bicycle and a piercing whistle. You paid by the week, or the month, or if you were a parson's wife like my mother, by the quarter. And paying the quarter's bill was always good for something, you know. A bag of sweets from the grocer, fruit from the greengrocer, castanets of dried rib bones from the butcher. And remember, you paid just for the food. And the food was fresher and natural, not mucked about in any factory. And very often it was local food. Cheese, say, or butter. Butter in lovely round shapes, moulded with the farmer's trademark. Now, you're probably thinking this kind of setup wouldn't do today, and you may be right. But give me yesterday.
Okay, so what I want to say about this, you know, I think most people, especially after COVID, we look at this and there's probably a renewed longing for this life, to walk into your local grocer where he knows you and you know him or her, what have you, and you know you get all the advantages, the things you spoke about. You would get, you know, a personalized. I mean, this was Amazon before there was Amazon. You got the delivery within the hour. Amazon can't do that, as far as I know. I'm not saying they never will be able to do that, but what I am saying is that, you know, we did have Amazon before there was Amazon. The local shops were able to deliver, since they were decentralized and they served a certain group of people. They could, you know, they have their boy delivered to your house, like you said, within the hour. And the mom and pop shop is a thing of the past, unfortunately. But I don't think it ever should have been a thing of the past. And this is where I want to talk about, which I believe to be the crux of the issue. You can't have the mom and pop shop today, because there's just not enough business, right? You won't get enough business. These guys were able to function, you know, sometimes, you know, without a lot of customers. But the mom and pop shop, especially the specialized mom and pop shops, cannot function with today's regulation and taxation. They're taxed and regulated to death, where only massive corporations can survive. But if you got rid of the taxation, I mean, if you not necessarily got rid of the taxation, but if you made taxation voluntary, like it is supposed to be under the biblical system, it's supposed to be voluntary, taxation is supposed to be voluntary. If you make taxation voluntary, you would get the mom and pop shop back, because especially for these mom and pop shops, your subsistence would not necessarily, you wouldn't have to necessarily depend on the customer or depend on money to be successful. That wouldn't necessarily be your main concern, because if you didn't sell anything for the day, right? There's technically not a net negative, right? If right now, if I have a mom and pop shop and for a whole month I don't sell anything, I'm at negative, because I still have to pay the taxes whether I sold anything or not. However, if I didn't have to pay taxes, the money I invested, you know, I don't have to pay anything extra beyond the money I've invested. So if I don't sell anything for a whole month, I'm still just out the money I invested, but that's it. There's no continuing negative drop, because if you don't sell anything for a whole year, you still, in our system, you still owe the taxes. You still have to pay the taxes. But if I own the property outright, my own property, my own building, right, and it's just me, I'm the only employee, the only thing I'm out is the money that I've invested. And that's what mom and pop shops need. They, you know, they usually exist with a very small and irregular customer base. Right now in our society, you can't really have a company that does that unless they're being supplemented by like a bigger company. You can't have a company survive on an irregular and small customer base, because the taxes and the regulation are so expensive that you need a steady income just to deal with the taxes and the regulation and the fees and all that kind of stuff. But if you owned a property outright and you didn't have to pay tax on it, like in God's system, there's no property tax, no income tax, mom and pop shops would be able to thrive, because they could go a whole day without selling anything and it'd be fine. It'd be okay, right? Because I don't need to keep on selling things to stay afloat, because there is no negative taxation pulling my business down. So you'd be able to go a long time without selling anything, But that's what mom and pop shops need to be able to survive. They need to be able to go a long time without selling anything. That's how you mom and pop shops thrive in society and culture, when they don't have a consistent and regular customer base. But the more regulation and more taxation a society institutes, the mom and pop shops are the first ones to go away, because they cannot survive. We're constantly paying taxes for services they don't get, and ever-changing standards and regulations and fees. There's no fear in God's system of the government coming in and shutting down your business because it's not clean. Okay? That's between you and the customer. As he said, things, if you heard that, oftentimes people considered unsanitary today, but back then it was considered normal, right? And there will be sanitary places that wouldn't do certain practices, and there'll be unsanitary places that, it's people's choice. If you think it's unsanitary, then don't go back. So the customer ultimately controls, and God's system ultimately controls the mom and pop shops. But right now, with all the licensing and fees and regulations, mom and pop shops can't exist. And that's my challenge to the Christian nationalists, who I don't think have thought this far, because if they want to go back to tradition and the way it was back in the 50s and all that kind of stuff, and we want to go back and have the golden days again, you've got to deal with this idea of taxation. And you've got to do it God's way, where taxation is voluntary. And if you don't do it where taxation is voluntary, you're not going to be able to go back to that time, because taxes were so low that mom and pop shops were able to exist. But once you force people to pay taxes never stay the same. They always go up 100% of the time. So if we're going to go back to our heritage and our traditions, we got to have the mom and pop shops again. And the only way for them to exist and to thrive is if we do government the way that God has set up government, which is voluntary taxation. I don't hear the Christian nationalists talking about that. I don't think they've gotten that far. I don't think they will get that far. I think the whole Christian nationalist edifice is heading towards, let's just get our guy in office. So that was the second thing, or the third thing I want to talk about here. So speaking of Christian nationalists, I want to talk about this real quick. So again, my sister sent me this. She's privy to what the Christian nationalists are saying. So, okay, let's take a look at this graph here. So this is from, I guess, our Grace-Filled Life on Instagram, I think. The rallying cry of, quote, repeal the 19th, unquote, is really just obfuscating the truth that you aren't allowed to say it out loud. Importing hordes of pagans who are giving permanent majorities for the party of death is what is entrenching baby murder further in our country. If we had the same demographics as historical America, it would already be outlawed, and so would gay marriage. Okay. So the second one is the same graph, but someone else is saying the historical, I guess the same lady. The historical ethnic character of America does not support abortion. They vote overwhelmingly against it. The reason we still have baby murder and liberalism has become to increasingly entrenched. The reason we still have baby murder and liberalism has become to increasingly entrenched. I guess that's supposed to be TOO. Has become too increasingly entrenched is because of changing demographics. 80% of blacks support the Democratic Party. In fact, black men support abortion at a higher percentage than black women. Repealing women's suffrage wouldn't do a dent in the support of baby murder in the black, Asian, Hispanic, and Indian communities. White men and women are the only demographic who has an intact majority that doesn't support baby murder. Okay. Two things on this. Okay, and they're showing a graph here, and look, white people don't, they're tying white people to Republicanism and black people to Democrats, and from there they're tying Democrats to pro-abortion, Republicans to anti-abortion. If you know anything about this discussion, I mean, that's a ridiculous and silly claim. Like, I think you're basically detached from the reality of the situation. So two things I want to say about this. One, the Christian nationalists, I guess, are starting to pivot, okay? Because the argument, I suspect this anyway, I'm not going to die on this hill, but I mean, it just seems to me from looking at this, the argument that okay, immigration is more of a problem than abortion. Once you view that with even a perfunctory glance, that's insane. It's ridiculous. Actually, killing people is not as bad as people come to this nation who might kill people. You can't sustain that argument and have a serious face. So I suspect this is an attempt by the Christian nationalists to pivot a little bit. Okay, maybe abortion is a little bit more important than we thought it was. They're starting to address the idea of the problem of abortion. So that could be a good thing. I don't expect them to get very far, especially with rhetoric like this. But to me, this looks like an attempt by the Christian nationalists to be like, okay, well, people want anti-abortion, I guess. All right, fine. I guess, you can't really sustain the argument that immigration is worse than abortion. So what they're trying to, I guess, suspect what they're trying to do is trying to pivot the argument a little bit and say, okay, yes, abortion is worse, but the reason we have abortion is because of the immigrants. So that's what they're trying to say here. Now they're trying to reel in that argument and trying to convince the people who are like, okay, obviously abortion is way worse than the immigrants. Come on, it's way worse, 1,000 times worse, please. And so the Christian nationalists are pivoting, I suspect, and going, oh, the reason we have abortion is because of the immigrants. Now, that's the first thing I want to say. Second thing I want to say is, if you've been on the streets and you've been to the abortion clinics, yes, I would say, I guess from the numbers, the black people do support abortion and take advantage of the abortion more than the white people. But if you remember Roe versus Wade, I don't know how many black people were on that panel. It was mostly white people. When you go out on the streets and you oppose abortion, it's white people who oppose you the most. The most outspoken and verbal people for abortion are white women. Right? It's just on the streets. That's what it is. It's very rare that you'll see a black person get up and shout in your face about the right for abortion. Very rare. Well, I don't say, very rare. I say comparatively rare. I mean, your chances of actually running into somebody who's going to oppose you, and it being a minority is substantially rare. Go watch the Abolitionist Rising page and tell me how many minorities you see arguing with those guys for abortion. It's very few minorities. It's mostly white people. And again, if you go to the clinics, who's walking in there? It's not mostly immigrants. It's mostly white people, right? The white people are killing their children at an alarming rate. If there's I would be surprised if Hispanics are more in favor of abortion than whites. I would be surprised. I would like to look at that data and examine that with a microscope, because I would be shocked. The Hispanics, unfortunately, are becoming more conservative than the whites in this nation. And I would be shocked if the Hispanics are more in favor of abortion. I guess it's possible, right? But when you're out there on the streets, even in the cities, I've been in the cities, and the people walking in there are just not Hispanics. They're not. The videos I see of people encountering other people, it's not Hispanics. It's mostly white people. It's mostly white women walking into the abortion and arguing with you on the sidewalk. It's white women. And the third thing I want to say is, I cannot believe in this day and age you still think the Republicans want to get rid of abortion. I cannot believe that. I have sat down with Republican politicians and said, why will you not support this bill of abolition? And these Republicans they'll hem and they'll haw and they'll clutch their pearls, and they will not support a bill of abolition. They won't do it. The Republicans don't want to see abortion outlawed. Right? Just when you corner them, they won't do it. They're either too afraid, or they know that's a huge revenue for me. It's my campaigning platform, and if abortion becomes illegal, then what am I going to campaign on? Silly things like that. The Republicans have no interest. And so tying the argument to, well, white people are more Republican, therefore they're more anti-abortion, is insane and ridiculous. The Republicans do not tie republicanism to anti-abortion. That's completely incidental. Just like I made the argument many times on this podcast, the liberals don't care about the immigrants. You're a fool if they do, if you think that they do. They don't care about the immigrants. It's just a way to control people. It is a way to own the conservatives and, piss off, white people or what have you, and Americans, and to give America the middle finger or what have you. They do not care about immigrants. Okay, they don't. Just like Republicans do not care about getting rid of abortion. That's not a concern of theirs. That's posturing. That's what we call posturing. That's what politicians do. They posture, but they don't really care at the end of the day. Very few of them do. So just like the Democrats posture about the border and immigrants, they really don't care about immigrants and the border. And just like that, the Democrats, the Republicans, don't care about children and child sacrifice. Don't care. They do not care. They're just as bad. They're just abusing and have useful idiots like this person who thinks that being pro-Republican means that you're anti-abortion, which is asinine and ridiculous. The Republicans don't care about abortion. When push comes to shove and you corner them, the Republican leaders, they would rather see abortion continue than to risk their campaign to get rid of it. I've been in the office. I've cornered them. I've seen other people corner them. They have never seen a consistent one, a faithful one, not once. Maybe one's out there somewhere. And maybe I'll buy a lottery ticket tomorrow and win. But those are just a couple of things I wanted to talk about and bring your attention to. And hopefully this podcast is a blessing to you as you think about the furthering of God's kingdom here on this earth. Under God's system, the gospel is never outlawed. But with a legislature, when you institute a legislature, it's only a matter of time until the gospel is outlawed. And you can't preach and teach the gospel message. We should never, ever put men and women in a position where they can outlaw the gospel. And once you create a legislature, that's basically, you just give it time. And just water it, seed it, check on it every now and then, give it some sunshine, and the fruit of it will be the outlawing of the gospel message. We thank and praise the Lord Jesus Christ that the coastlands wait for his law. Even America, still, we wait for God's law in this nation because we never got it, unfortunately. So that's all I have for you today, folks. Thank you so much for listening. Visit futureofchristendom.org for updates, announcements, debates, great content on there. Thanks for listening, and remember, my friends, think and reform.